Story number 1. The Thing in the Trailer. Jessica Ramirez specialized in refrigerated transport, keeping temperature-sensitive cargo at precise conditions across long distances. With 12 years of experience, she'd hauled everything from pharmaceuticals to frozen food. On March 3, 2021, she picked up a sealed container from a pharmaceutical facility outside Memphis, bound for a research center in Minneapolis. The paperwork was standard except for one detail. She was forbidden from opening the trailer under any circumstances, with a breach of contract clause that would cost her $50,000. The cargo was listed as biological samples requiring constant 20°C of temperature. The refrigeration unit hummed efficiently as she pulled onto I-55 North. Around midnight, somewhere in Missouri, Jessica heard something that made her skin crawl. A thump from inside the trailer. Then another. She checked her temperature monitor. Perfect, 20°C. Nothing could be alive in there. She convinced herself it was cargo shifting and kept driving. The thumping became rhythmic, methodical. It moved from the front of the trailer toward the back, like something walking down the interior length. Her CB radio erupted with static, and beneath the white noise she heard breathing. Deep, wet, labored breathing that synced with the footsteps in her trailer. Jessica pulled into a rest area near Bloomington, her hands shaking. The temperature gauge still read 20°C. She walked around the trailer, pressing her ear against the refrigerated walls. Silence. She returned to the cab, and the moment she started the engine, the footsteps resumed. She called the pharmaceutical company. The night operator seemed confused by her manifest number, claiming no such shipment existed in their system. When Jessica insisted reading the contract details, the line went dead. She tried again. The number was disconnected. The footsteps grew louder, accompanied by a scraping sound, metal on metal, like something dragging claws along the interior walls. Jessica's breath fogged in the cab despite the heater running full blast. The temperature outside was 48 degrees, but frost began forming on her windshield from the inside. Near Iowa City, she saw something that stopped her heart. In her mirror, under the trailer marker lights, a dark liquid was seeping from beneath the door. It dripped onto the highway, steaming when it hit the pavement despite the freezing temperature in the trailer. Jessica made a decision. She pulled into a 24-hour truck stop and backed into a loading bay. She grabbed a crowbar from her toolkit and approached the trailer doors. Her hands were numb, her breath coming in short gasps. The lock was standard, but when she touched it, the metal was warm, almost hot. She broke the seal, opened the doors. The interior lights flickered on, revealing a completely empty trailer. No cargo, no biological samples, nothing but bare walls and a perfect 20°C of temperature reading. But the floor was covered in something that made Jessica's mind refuse to process what she was seeing. Footprints. Bare human footprints. Dozens of them overlapping, circling, made from something dark and wet that wasn't quite blood. They covered every surface, the walls, the ceiling, as if something had walked on every interior surface, defying gravity and physics. In the center of the floor was a message written in that same dark substance. "Thank you for the ride." Jessica stumbled backward, falling onto the pavement. When she looked up, the trailer was normal. Clean white walls, no footprints, no message. But her hands were covered in the dark liquid, and it burned like acid. She scrubbed them raw at the truck stop bathroom sink, but the stain wouldn't come out completely. Her palms still carry shadow marks that look like frostbite scars. She abandoned the truck and trailer that night. The pharmaceutical company never contacted her about the failed delivery. When she tried to report the incident, she discovered the company didn't exist. The address in Memphis was an empty lot. Her contract paperwork vanished from her files. Jessica doesn't drive refrigerated anymore. She can't. Every time she hears a cooling unit's hum, she hears those footsteps. Sometimes late at night, she wakes to find new footprints appearing on her bedroom ceiling, one by one, circling above her bed. She watches them form from nothing, wet and dark, and she knows that whatever she hauled that night followed her home. It's still walking, always walking, and one day it's going to walk right out of the ceiling and down to where she sleeps. Story number 2, The Endless Highway. Marcus Holloway had been driving the I-80 corridor for 17 years, hauling freight between Omaha and Sacramento. He knew every rest stop, every way station, every diner that served decent coffee at 3 in the morning. On November 14th, 2019, that familiarity meant nothing. He'd picked up a load of industrial machinery in Des Moines, nothing unusual, and departed at 9 p.m. for an overnight haul. The weather was clear, traffic light, and his CB radio played the usual chatter of drivers reporting road conditions and sharing the loneliness of the night shift. Around 1:30 a.m., somewhere between exit 107 and 112 in Nebraska, Marcus noticed the mile markers. Exit 109 appeared on his right. He passed it, watching his odometer tick forward. 5 miles later, exit 109 appeared again. He assumed he'd misread it in his fatigue, but when he checked his GPS, it showed him progressing normally along the highway. The next marker he saw read 109, then 109 again. Marcus grabbed his CB radio. "Anyone else on I-80 westbound near exit 109? This is Big Dog, over." Static answered him. He tried again, cycling through channels, nothing but white noise. His phone showed full signal but wouldn't complete any calls. The screen kept displaying the time as 1:47 a.m. He decided to take the exit, break the loop, but when he signaled and moved toward the off-ramp, his truck wouldn't turn. The steering wheel moved in his hands, but the vehicle continued straight. Marcus felt sweat break across his forehead. He tried the brakes. The pedal went to the floor, but his speed remained constant at exactly 65 miles per hour. The highway stretched ahead, identical in every way. The same reflector posts, the same gentle curve, the same distant tree line. He passed exit 109 73 times by his count, though his clock never moved past 1:47 a.m. His fuel gauge hadn't dropped a single increment. The engine temperature remained perfect. Everything was frozen except his ability to perceive. After what felt like hours but registered as no time at all, Marcus saw something different. A figure stood on the shoulder ahead, visible in his headlights. As he approached, unable to slow or steer away, he saw it was a man in a trucker's uniform. The man's face was his own. The figure watched him pass with hollow eyes, and Marcus saw the name patch on the uniform. Holloway. He passed his own corpse 17 more times. Each time the figure had moved slightly further down the shoulder, as if walking backward along the eternal road. Marcus screamed into the CB radio, pounded on the steering wheel, tried to crash into the guardrail, but nothing responded. He was a passenger in his own vehicle on a highway that wouldn't end. Then at some unmeasurable point, his truck shuddered. The steering wheel jerked in his hands. His clock suddenly read 4:23 a.m. The GPS showed him approaching exit 145, over 200 miles from where he'd been trapped. The CB crackled to life with normal traffic chatter. Marcus pulled off at the next exit and sat in a truck stop parking lot until dawn, shaking so badly he couldn't hold his coffee cup. He checked his logbook. According to the automatic tracking system, he'd driven those 200 miles in exactly the time it should have taken, with no gaps, no stops, no anomalies. He reported his load delivered on schedule in Sacramento. His dispatcher noted nothing unusual. But Marcus couldn't explain the streaks of gray that had appeared in his hair overnight, or why his odometer showed 4,000 extra miles that no one else could account for. He still drives I-80, though he never runs at night anymore. Sometimes, in his mirrors at dusk, he sees a truck behind him that looks exactly like his own, and he speeds up until the lights disappear. He's terrified of what he'll see if he ever lets it catch up. His CB radio picks up strange transmissions sometimes, a voice that sounds like his own, calling for help on a highway that goes nowhere. Marcus keeps driving, always watching his mirrors, always counting the mile markers, always afraid that one night the numbers will stop changing and he'll find himself back on that endless stretch of road where time means nothing and exit 109 repeats forever. He's seen his own ghost on that highway, and he knows it's waiting for him to return, to finally stay, to become permanent like the reflector posts and the distant trees that never get any closer no matter how far you drive into the Nebraska darkness. Story number 3, the midnight fuel stop. Raymond Kowalski ran dedicated routes for a major retailer, driving the same loop weekly between their distribution center in Charlotte and stores throughout Georgia. His schedule was precise, his stops predictable. On August 19, 2018, that routine shattered. He was running behind schedule due to warehouse delays and pushing to make up time on I-85 South. Around 11:45 p.m., his fuel gauge dropped to a quarter tank earlier than expected. His usual fuel stop was 40 miles ahead, but a highway sign advertised a truck stop at the next exit. Big Rig Travel Plaza, fuel, food, showers, exit 67. Raymond didn't remember seeing that sign on previous runs, but he'd been driving this route for 3 years, and the exits blurred together. He took exit 67 and followed the signs down a 2-lane road into dense Georgia pine forest. After 2 miles, the travel plaza appeared, brilliantly lit against the darkness. The parking lot was empty, not unusual for a rural stop near midnight. Raymond pulled up to the diesel pumps and stepped out. The air felt wrong, too still, too quiet. No insects, no breeze, no distant traffic hum. Just silence and the harsh fluorescent lights. The fuel pump was old, analog, with spinning number wheels instead of a digital display. Raymond swiped his fleet card. The pump activated, and he began filling his tank. That's when he noticed the date on the pump's inspection sticker, November 1987. He looked around more carefully. The building's architecture was dated, the signage style from decades past. The prices on the backlit menu board showed diesel at $0.89 per gallon. Raymond's stomach tightened. He released the pump handle, but the fuel kept flowing, the numbers spinning faster and faster. The lights inside the building flickered. Raymond saw movement. People appeared behind the windows, dozens of them, all wearing clothing from different eras. 1950s dresses, 1970s trucker attire, 1980s business suits. They all turned to look at him simultaneously, their faces pale and expressionless. Raymond ran to his cab, but his truck wouldn't start. The engine turned over but wouldn't catch. The fuel pump continued running, and he watched in horror as the gallon counter spun into impossible numbers. 500 gallons, 1,000 gallons, 5,000 gallons. His tank only held 300 gallons, but diesel continued pouring in with nowhere to go. The figures emerged from the building, walking toward him in lockstep. Raymond recognized some of them from missing person posters he'd seen at real truck stops, faces from unsolved disappearances spanning 40 years. They moved silently, their feet not quite touching the pavement. He tried his CB radio. Static. His cell phone showed no signal, and the screen displayed 1987 where the year should be. The figures surrounded his truck, pressing their pale hands against the windows. And Raymond saw they cast no reflections in his mirrors. In desperation, he grabbed his fire extinguisher and smashed his own door window. He climbed through, cutting his arms on the glass, and ran toward the road. Behind him, the figures didn't pursue. They simply watched, standing in a perfect circle around his truck. Raymond ran for what felt like hours through the pine forest, following the road back toward the highway. When he finally reached I-85, gasping and bleeding, he flagged down another truck. The driver stared at him like he'd seen a ghost. "Jesus, man, you look like you've been running through hell. Where's your rig?" Raymond couldn't explain coherently. The driver called highway patrol and drove him back toward exit 67. There was no exit. The highway continued uninterrupted, and neither the driver nor the state trooper could see any sign of an off-ramp. According to their maps and GPS, exit 67 didn't exist on I-85. Raymond's truck was found 3 days later, parked at his usual fuel stop 40 miles south of where he'd disappeared. It was locked, engine cold, with a full tank of diesel. The security cameras showed no footage of anyone driving or parking it. The fuel card records showed no transaction at any mysterious location, just a normal fill-up at the regular stop. But Raymond's arms carried scars from the window glass, and his boots were caked with red Georgia clay that didn't match any soil from the areas he'd supposedly been. His logbook was missing 3 hours that he couldn't account for. 3 hours that existed in his memory but not in any official timeline. He quit long-haul driving. Now he works local deliveries, never leaving Charlotte, never driving at night. But sometimes he sees that exit sign in his peripheral vision on random highways. Exit 67, Big Rig Travel Plaza. It appears for just a moment, then vanishes when he looks directly at it. He never takes his eyes off the road now, terrified that one glance at the wrong exit will pull him back to that place where time folded in on itself and disappeared. Gather under fluorescent lights that never go out, waiting for drivers who stray from the roads that truly exist. Story number 4, The Phantom Dispatcher. Thomas Chen worked for a small freight company out of Portland, Oregon, running loads throughout the Pacific Northwest. The operation was family-owned, just 12 drivers and a dispatcher named Carol who'd worked there for 30 years. On January 26, 2020, Thomas received a dispatch call that would unravel everything he thought he knew. It was 2 a.m. He just finished a delivery in Spokane and was heading to a motel when his company phone rang. Carol's voice came through, professional as always. "Thomas, we need you to pick up an emergency load. Clients willing to pay triple rate for immediate transport." She gave him an address in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, just 40 minutes away. Thomas was tired but couldn't refuse triple pay. He drove to the address, an industrial warehouse on the outskirts of town. The building was dark except for one loading bay. A man in a suit waited with paperwork and a single crate, maybe 4 feet square, sealed with metal bands. "Deliver this to the Portland warehouse by 8 a.m., the man said. "Do not stop. Do not open it. Carol has the details." He handed Thomas the bill of lading and vanished back into the building before Thomas could ask questions. The crate was heavy, and it hummed. A low subsonic vibration that Thomas felt in his teeth. He secured it in the trailer and started the 7-hour drive to Portland. Around 4 a.m., his company phone rang again, Carol's voice. "Thomas, where are you? Why aren't you at the motel?" "I'm on I-90, Thomas said, "heading back with that emergency load you dispatched me for." Silence. Then Carol's voice, confused and frightened. "Thomas, I didn't call you tonight. I've been home asleep since 9 p.m. Thomas's blood turned cold. "You called me at 2 a.m. Emergency pickup in Coeur d'Alene, triple rate." "Thomas, that wasn't me. Come back to Portland immediately and go straight to the police." He hung up and checked his phone's call history. The 2 a.m. call showed as coming from the company number. He called back. Carol answered, now fully awake and terrified. She confirmed she'd made no calls, authorized no pickups. She checked the company system. Minutes later, she called back. "Thomas, there's no record of any load. No client, no paperwork, no authorization. Whatever you're carrying, it's not company business." Thomas pulled over at a rest area, his heart hammering. The crate in his trailer was humming louder now, and the vibration was making his mirrors shake. He walked to the back, considering whether to open it despite the instructions. His phone rang, Carol's voice. "Thomas, you're doing great. Keep driving, maintain schedule." "Carol, you just told me to go to the police." "Ignore that. Deliver the load. Everything is fine." The voice was Carol's, identical in every way, but something was wrong. The inflection, the word choice, slightly off. Thomas called Carol's personal cell phone. She answered immediately. "Thomas, do not deliver that crate. The police are on their way to intercept you." But his company phone rang again. Carol's voice. "Thomas, avoid the police. They'll confiscate the cargo. You'll lose everything." He was receiving calls from Carol on two phones simultaneously. Both voices identical, both claiming to be real. Thomas's hands shook as he tried to determine which was which. The Carol on his personal phone knew details only the real Carol would know. His daughter's name, his hire date, personal conversations they'd had. The Carol on the company phone avoided specifics and kept focusing on the delivery. Thomas made a decision. He opened the trailer and approached the crate with a crowbar. The humming intensified and his company phone began ringing constantly, Carol's voice begging him not to open it, screaming that he'd ruin everything. He pried open the crate. Inside was electronic equipment, communications gear, and a laptop displaying lines of code. On the screen was a waveform analysis interface showing Carol's voice pattern with options to generate phone calls. Beneath the equipment was a hard drive labeled with the names of 17 different trucking companies. Thomas photographed everything and called the real Carol on her personal phone. She contacted the FBI. The investigation revealed an elaborate freight hijacking operation. Criminals had been using AI voice synthesis and phone network manipulation to impersonate dispatchers, sending drivers to pick up stolen goods or contraband. But that didn't explain everything. The FBI examined Thomas's company phone records. The calls from the fake Carol had originated from phone numbers that didn't exist in any network database. The timestamps showed some calls had been placed at times when the cell towers showed no traffic at all, as if the calls existed in gaps between seconds. More disturbing, when investigators checked the warehouse in Coeur d'Alene, the address didn't exist. The area was a vacant lot. Security cameras from nearby businesses showed Thomas's truck parked on an empty street with him apparently loading a crate from thin air. Thomas provided the bill of lading he'd been given. The paper was analyzed by forensics. The document was printed on paper stock that hadn't been manufactured since 1994, with ink that carbon dated to 1998, yet Thomas had received it hours ago. The equipment in the crate vanished from FBI evidence lockup 3 days later. The hard drive with 17 company names was found in a dumpster, completely degaussed, no data recoverable. All personnel who'd handled it reported receiving strange phone calls afterward, voices of deceased family members asking them to forget what they'd seen. Thomas quit trucking entirely. His company phone continued to ring for weeks after he disconnected the service. Carol's voice leaving messages about loads that didn't exist, directions to places not on any map. He destroyed the phone, but sometimes his personal phone rings at 2 a.m. and when he answers, there's only breathing and that low subsonic hum that makes his teeth ache. Carol retired early. She couldn't bear the thought that something out there was using her voice, sending drivers into danger, issuing instructions in her name to destinations that existed somewhere between the real world and whatever lay beneath it. Sometimes she hears her own voice on recordings she didn't make, dispatching drivers to coordinates that lead to empty spaces where warehouses should be but aren't, where crates wait to be loaded that hum with frequencies no human equipment should produce. Story number 5. The missing 70 miles. Derek Paulson drove for a major shipping corporation. handling high-priority overnight deliveries across the Southwest. His route on October 8, 2017 was routine: Phoenix to Albuquerque for 60 miles straight shot on I-40 East. He'd driven it hundreds of times. This trip would be different in ways that still defy explanation. Derek departed Phoenix at 6:00 p.m. with a load of electronics, planning to arrive in Albuquerque by 2:00 a.m. with fuel and rest stops calculated precisely. The evening was clear, traffic light. He maintained steady speed, made his planned fuel stop in Holbrook, Arizona at 8:30 p.m., and continued east. Around 10:00 p.m. between Chambers and Sanders, Arizona, Derek entered a stretch of highway he'd driven countless times. Flat desert, straight road, distant mesas silhouetted against the night sky. He checked his GPS, 70 miles to Gallup, New Mexico. He settled in for the routine stretch. Then he was in Gallup, no transition, no memory of driving. One moment he was 70 miles west of the city, the next moment he was passing the exit signs. Derek looked at his clock. 10:03 p.m. 3 minutes had passed. His GPS confirmed his location. Somehow he'd covered 70 miles in 3 minutes. His first thought was that he'd fallen asleep and lost time, but that didn't explain the math. Even if he'd blacked out for an hour, he couldn't have driven 70 miles. His cruise control had been set at 68 km. The distance should have taken over an hour, not 3 minutes. Derek pulled into a truck stop in Gallup, shaking. He checked his logbook and electronic tracking system. According to the GPS data, he'd driven continuously from Holbrook at legal speeds with no gaps. But his internal clock insisted that an entire hour had vanished from his perception. He examined his truck. No damage, no signs of anything unusual. His fuel level was exactly where it should be for the distance traveled. His coffee in the cup holder was still hot. The ice in his water bottle barely melted. No physical evidence supported the passage of an hour. Derek called his dispatcher, tried to explain. They checked his tracking data remotely. "Derek, you're right on schedule. Actually, you're making great time. Everything looks normal from here." But it wasn't normal. Derek couldn't remember driving 70 miles of highway. He tried to recall any details from that stretch: landmarks, other vehicles, weather conditions, nothing. His memory contained the moment before and the moment after, with a void between them that should have held an hour of experience. He continued to Albuquerque, arriving exactly on time according to his original schedule. But Derek's watch was 1 hour slow compared to every other clock. He'd synchronized it at the fuel stop in Holbrook, yet now it showed an hour earlier than his truck's clock, his phone, the delivery dock's timestamp. Over the following weeks, Derek became obsessed with understanding what happened. He drove that same stretch of I-40 repeatedly during different times of day and different weather, hyper alert for any anomaly. Nothing unusual ever occurred. Then he found the photographs. His truck's dash cam maintained continuous recording. Derek reviewed the footage from that night, and what he saw made him question reality itself. The footage showed him driving through that 70-mile stretch. It showed the road, the darkness, the headlights. But it also showed something impossible. The landscape was moving incorrectly. The stars in the sky were streaking, not fixed. The mile markers were passing in rapid succession, faster than his speedometer indicated. It was as if the world outside was accelerating while his truck maintained normal speed. And there were other vehicles on the road in the footage, caught in his headlights and mirrors. Dozens of them, ghostly and translucent, all moving in the same accelerated way. Trucks, cars, buses, some looking modern, some appearing to be from different eras. They surrounded him like a convoy of phantoms, all racing through that corridor of compressed time. Derek took the footage to experts. Video analysts confirmed it hadn't been edited or manipulated, but they couldn't explain the anomalous motion. Physicists he consulted suggested equipment malfunction, but the camera had worked perfectly before and after that segment. Most disturbing was the final minute of the footage. Just before Derek's memory resumed in Gallup, the dash cam caught something in the distance ahead. A light, brilliant and blue-white, hovering above the highway. All the ghostly vehicles were converging on it, being drawn into it. Derek's truck approached the light, and then the footage showed normal highway again, with Derek in Gallup, his memory returning. He filed reports with his company, with state police, with anyone who would listen. Other drivers began coming forward with similar stories, missing time on that same stretch of I-40. Gaps in memory, clocks running slow, dashcam footage showing impossible physics. The phenomenon was dubbed the Gallup Corridor among truckers. Some claimed it was a magnetic anomaly, others suggested secret military experiments. Some insisted it was proof of something beyond conventional understanding, but no official explanation ever emerged. Derek still drives, but he refuses to run I-40 through that section. He takes Highway 60 north, adding hours to his route, avoiding those 70 miles where time behaves differently. He kept one photograph from his dashcam footage, printed and laminated, carried in his wallet, a frame showing his truck surrounded by the translucent convoy of vehicles from other times, all racing toward that impossible light. Sometimes on long night drives on completely different highways, Derek's watch runs slow again. He'll check it against his phone and find he's lost 15 minutes, 30 minutes, sometimes an hour. His GPS shows normal travel, but his memory has gaps, small voids where experience should exist but doesn't. He started keeping detailed journals, documenting every trip, comparing his perception of time against objective measurements. The discrepancies are increasing. Last month, he lost 3 hours on a route from Dallas to Little Rock, though all his tracking data showed normal progression. Derek suspects that whatever happened in the Gallup corridor opened something in him or marked him in some way. He's not moving through time like everyone else anymore. Parts of his existence are being compressed, skipped over, as if he's slowly becoming like those ghostly vehicles in his dashcam footage. Not quite solid, not quite present in the continuous flow of normal time. He's terrified of what comes next, afraid that one day he'll blink and discover that years have passed, that he's become permanently unstuck from the timeline, doomed to race through existence in 3-minute bursts that span hours or days, watching the world age around him in accelerated motion while he remains trapped in a vehicle that no longer moves through space and time the way physics intended. Story number 6, the parallel delivery. Sarah Mitchell prided herself on perfectionism. In 8 years of driving for a regional logistics company, she'd never missed a delivery window, never damaged cargo, never filed an accident claim. On May 15, 2019, that pristine record became meaningless when she delivered the same load twice to 2 different realities. Her assignment was straightforward: pick up restaurant equipment from a manufacturer in Toledo, Ohio, and deliver it to a new location in Columbus, 140 miles south. She loaded the cargo at 7:01 a.m., secured it properly, and documented everything with the thorough photographs she always took for her records. The drive was uneventful. Light traffic on Route 23, sunny weather, good road conditions. Sarah arrived at the Columbus delivery address at 10:30 a.m., a shopping center still under construction. The restaurant manager met her, checked the cargo, and signed the delivery confirmation. Sarah helped unload, took her completion photos, and departed at 11:45 a.m. She stopped for lunch at a highway diner 15 miles north of Columbus. While eating, she reviewed her paperwork and noticed something odd. The delivery address on her manifest didn't match the address she'd just left. Close but different. The correct address was 2847 Riverside Avenue. She delivered to 2847 Riverbend Avenue. Sarah's stomach dropped. She delivered a $50,000 shipment to the wrong location. She called her dispatcher in panic, explained the error. Her dispatcher checked the system. "Sarah, I'm showing the delivery as completed correctly. You're at 2847 Riverside Avenue right now according to your truck's GPS." "No, I'm at a diner 15 miles away. I delivered to Riverbend Avenue by mistake." "Sarah, there is no Riverbend Avenue in that area. Are you sure you misread it?" Sarah insisted she hadn't. She drove back to Columbus immediately, searching for the shopping center where she'd made the delivery. She found Riverside Avenue easily. Number 2847 was a shopping center under construction, but it looked different. The layout was similar but not identical. Different stores, different architecture. She walked inside. The restaurant space was empty, unfinished construction, no equipment, no manager, no evidence of any delivery. Sarah checked her photos on her phone. They showed her unloading the equipment, showed the signed manifest, showed the restaurant manager's face clearly. But the background in the photos looked slightly different from the location she stood in now. Sarah drove around frantically, searching for Riverbend Avenue. She used her GPS, checked her map applications, asked at local businesses. No one had heard of Riverbend Avenue. According to every source, it didn't exist in Columbus. She returned to her company's terminal in Cleveland, 3 hours north, and presented her evidence to her operations manager. The photos showed a clear delivery. The signed manifest had a real signature. Her truck's GPS data showed she'd been at 2847 Riverside Avenue at the correct time. But Sarah's own memory and photographs contradicted the official record. The equipment manufacturer was contacted. They confirmed receiving payment for the order and had tracking confirmation that Sarah had delivered it. The restaurant owner confirmed receiving the equipment and provided photos of the installed machines in his establishment. His photos matched Sarah's photos, showed the same equipment in the same space. But when Sarah visited the Riverside Avenue address again, the restaurant was still an empty construction site. She showed the owner's photos to the construction manager. He looked confused. "This isn't our project. This is our lot, but those photos show a completely different build-out. Different floor plan, different fixtures. We haven't installed anything yet." Sarah began investigating obsessively. She interviewed people at the shopping center. Some remembered seeing a moving truck that morning. Others insisted no deliveries had occurred. She spoke to the restaurant owner by phone. He described the equipment's location in his establishment, but his description matched neither the empty construction site nor the background in Sarah's photos. She consulted with a private investigator who made a disturbing discovery. The shopping center at 2847 Riverside Avenue had 2 different construction permits filed. One showed the current project underway. The other, filed with a county office in a different building, showed a completely different project with different contractors and different tenants, including the restaurant Sarah had delivered to. When confronted with this discrepancy, county officials were baffled. Both permits appeared legitimate. Both had proper authorization, but they existed in separate filing systems that should have been synchronized. It was as if 2 different versions of the same property existed in parallel bureaucratic realities. Sarah found other drivers who'd experienced similar incidents in Columbus. Deliveries made to addresses that were correct but wrong. Cargo unloaded into buildings that looked familiar but different. Recipients who existed in some records but not others. The phenomenon seemed centered on a specific area of the city, a zone approximately 5 square miles where reality appeared unstable. A geologist Sarah consulted mentioned that the area sat above a complex of limestone caves, some mapped, some unexplored. Historical records showed the area had experienced strange magnetic anomalies, compass malfunctions, and unexplained electronics failures for over a century. Sarah's case was never resolved. Her company accepted the delivery as complete based on the GPS data and signed manifest. The restaurant owner confirmed receiving the equipment. but Sarah knows she delivered it to a place that doesn't exist on any official map, to a version of Columbus that occupies the same coordinates but exists somewhere else. She drives through Columbus regularly now, watching carefully. Sometimes the shopping center looks like the construction site it's supposed to be. Other times, for brief moments, it looks exactly like the place in her photographs, finished, occupied with the restaurant operating and the equipment she delivered visible through the windows. Sarah has started seeing the split in other locations. Buildings that flicker between states, roads that exist in two versions simultaneously, entire city blocks that appear differently depending on the angle of approach. She's learned not to trust that the world is singular and consistent, that any delivery might be made to an address that exists in a parallel iteration of reality, just slightly offset from consensus existence. She still takes thorough photographs of every delivery, but now she takes them from multiple angles at different times, trying to capture evidence of the shifts. Her phone contains thousands of images of the same locations looking subtly different, proof that the world isn't as solid as everyone assumes. Sarah's friends and family worry about her mental state, but she knows she's not delusional. She delivered that equipment somewhere real, signed by someone who exists, to a building that occupies physical space. The fact that it exists in a Columbus that overlaps with but isn't quite the same as the consensus Columbus doesn't make it less real. She's terrified that one day she'll make a delivery and won't be able to return, that she'll drive into one of these parallel spaces and find that the road back has closed, leaving her stranded in a version of reality where everything is almost right but permanently wrong, where her company doesn't recognize her, her home doesn't exist, and she's trapped behind a transparent barrier watching the life she used to have continue without her, in a world she can see but can no longer touch. Story number 7. The Voice from the Radio. Kevin Torres had been driving solo for 11 years, and the loneliness never bothered him. He preferred the solitude, the long hours with nothing but highway and his own thoughts. His CB radio stayed on more for safety monitoring than conversation. On December the 2nd, 2020, that changed when the radio started talking back. He was hauling automotive parts from Detroit to Nashville, running overnight to avoid traffic. Around 2:30 a.m., somewhere on I-65 in rural Kentucky, his CB radio crackled with a voice on Channel 19. Big Blue Kenworth, northbound lane, you've got a tire issue, driver's side rear trailer. Kevin checked his mirrors. His truck was blue, but the voice said northbound and he was heading south. He keyed his mic. This is southbound, not northbound. You might have me confused with someone else. Silence for a moment. Then the voice returned. Negative driver, you're northbound. Check your tire before you throw a retread. Kevin looked at his GPS, definitely heading south. He checked the mile markers through his window, confirming southbound direction. Unknown caller, I'm southbound on I-65. Maybe check your own directions. The voice responded immediately. Kevin Torres, Blue Kenworth, license plate 7XJ449, loaded with automotive parts. You're northbound, and you've got 15 minutes before that tire fails completely. Kevin's blood froze. His name, his plate number, his cargo, but the direction was wrong. He pulled onto the shoulder and conducted a thorough tire inspection. Everything was perfect. No issues, proper pressure, good tread. He returned to the cab and grabbed the CB mic. Unknown caller, how do you know my information? Identify yourself. You asked me to warn you, the voice said. 6 hours from now. You asked me to contact you at this exact time and location. That doesn't make any sense. It will. Kevin, listen carefully. In approximately 12 miles, you'll see a rest area. Do not stop there. No matter what happens, no matter what you need, don't stop. Continue to the next exit and take Route 218 east. Kevin's hands were shaking. Who the hell is this? "This is you, Kevin, 6 hours ahead. I'm trying to prevent what happened to me." The radio went silent. Kevin sat on the shoulder for 10 minutes trying to rationalize what he'd heard. Someone was messing with him, had somehow gotten his information, was playing an elaborate prank. He dismissed it and continued driving. 12 miles later, he saw the rest area. His fuel was at 3/4. He didn't need a bathroom break, but something compelled him to pull in. The rest area was nearly empty, just 2 other trucks and a car. Normal. Unremarkable. Kevin walked to the facilities building. Everything seemed routine until he saw the man standing by the vending machines. The man was wearing the exact same clothes Kevin had on. Same jacket, same jeans, same company cap. The man looked at him with terror in his eyes and ran toward him. "Get out!" the man hissed. "Now! You're not supposed to be here!" Kevin backed away, his hand moving to his phone. The man grabbed his arm. Kevin saw the man's face clearly. It was his own face, but older, haggard, with a scar running along the left cheek that Kevin didn't have. "You didn't listen to the radio," the other Kevin said. "You stopped anyway. You have to leave right now before they see you." "Before who sees me?" "Everyone here. They're not real. This place isn't real. It's a trap, a fold in the highway where time loops. I've been stuck here for 6 hours trying to warn you. If they see you, both of us, it'll lock the paradox and neither of us will get out." Kevin jerked his arm free and ran to his truck. In his mirror, he saw the other Kevin collapse to his knees, clutching his head. The other trucks in the parking lot started their engines simultaneously. The car's headlights turned on. They all began moving toward Kevin's position. He started his truck and accelerated out of the rest area, nearly sideswiping a passenger car on the entrance ramp. His CB radio erupted with multiple voices, all his own voice, overlapping. "Don't stop, don't stop, don't stop. You stopped, you stopped, you stopped. Turn around, come back. You need to warn him. You're too late, you're too late." Kevin drove for an hour without stopping, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. The voices on the CB gradually faded. When he finally felt safe enough to pull over at a populated truck stop, he inspected his reflection in his mirror. No scar on his cheek. He took a photo of his face, documenting the absence of any mark. He completed his delivery to Nashville, parked at the terminal, and tried to sleep. When he woke 6 hours later, he touched his face and felt a ridge under his fingers. In the mirror, a fresh scar ran along his left cheek, exactly where he'd seen it on the other Kevin's face. The wound wasn't bleeding, wasn't healing. It simply existed as if it had always been there. Kevin checked the photo he'd taken hours earlier. In the image, his face now showed the scar. But he remembered taking the photo, remembered checking it at the time, remembered seeing his unmarked face. The past had changed, or his memory was wrong, or both. He never ran I-65 through Kentucky again, always taking alternate routes that added hours to his schedule. But the scar remains, and sometimes it burns, especially around 2:30 a.m. When it does, his CB radio activates by itself, and he hears his own voice trying to warn drivers about a rest area, trying to prevent them from making the same stop, trying to break a loop that might still be trapping some version of himself in a parking lot where time folded wrong. Kevin researches quantum physics and time paradoxes obsessively now. He's convinced he met himself, or met a version of himself trapped in a causal loop. The scar is proof that he didn't fully escape, that some consequence of that encounter marked him permanently. Other drivers report similar experiences on that stretch of highway. Voices on CB radios warning them away from specific locations, rest areas that appear on GPS but aren't on maps, encounters with drivers who look familiar in uncanny ways. Kevin has collected dozens of stories trying to map the phenomenon. He believes there are pockets along highways where time becomes unstable, where the constant flow of travelers moving through space-time creates eddies and loops, trapping people in repeating moments. The rest area was one such pocket. and he brushed against it, marked by it, left with a scar that exists across multiple versions of his timeline. Kevin still drives, still hauls freight, but he monitors Channel 19 constantly now, listening for voices that sound like his own. He's waiting for the moment when he'll need to transmit backward, to warn his past self about something he hasn't experienced yet, to close a loop that he suspects is already written into his future. The scar on his face burns as a reminder that time isn't as linear as everyone assumes, and somewhere on I-65, in a rest area that exists between moments, another version of Kevin Torres might still be trying to escape a parking lot where the same night replays forever. Story number 8, The Final Run. Mitchell Grant was 56 years old and approaching retirement. After 32 years of long-haul trucking, he'd planned his final run to be symbolic, a coast-to-coast haul from Seattle to Miami, the longest route he could book. On September 23, 2018, he departed Seattle with a mixed load, his wife and grown children planning a retirement party for his return. He never made it to Miami. Instead, he delivered his cargo to somewhere much stranger. The first 2 days were perfect. Mitchell savored every mile, every sunset, every mountain pass. He'd driven millions of miles in his career, and this farewell tour let him appreciate the beauty he'd often taken for granted. By day 3, crossing Wyoming on I-80, something began to feel wrong. The highway looked normal, but Mitchell couldn't shake the sensation that he'd driven this exact stretch before, not just on previous trips, but recently, within the past hour. The same configuration of trucks ahead of him, the same cloud formation, the same billboard advertising a roadside attraction. He checked his odometer. He was making progress, but his memory insisted otherwise. Near Rawlins, Wyoming, he saw a rest area and decided to stop, break the sense of déjà vu. The parking lot was full of trucks, but something about them seemed staged, positioned too precisely, too symmetrically. Mitchell parked and walked to the facilities building. Inside, he encountered other drivers, maybe 15 of them, all sitting in the seating area. They turned to look at him with expressions of resignation and defeat. An older driver approached him, a man who looked to be in his 70s. "You're new," the man said. "How many loops have you been through?" "Loops?" Mitchell asked. "How many times have you driven this stretch? Seen the same things repeating?" Mitchell's confusion must have shown. The older driver sighed. "You're still on your first. That's why you stopped. We all stopped during our first loop, trying to break the pattern, but there is no breaking it." The other drivers nodded. One woman spoke up. "I've been here for 87 loops. Some of these guys have been through hundreds. We drive I-80 through Wyoming over and over and end up back at this rest area every time." Mitchell backed toward the door. "This is insane. You're all insane." "Check your fuel," the old driver said. "No matter how much you use, it resets. Check your phone. The date never advances. We're stuck, driver, and now so are you." Mitchell ran to his truck and pulled out of the rest area, his heart racing. He drove east at maximum speed, desperate to reach the Wyoming border. Hours passed. He crossed into Nebraska, according to the signs. But then he saw it ahead. The same rest area. The same configuration of trucks. He'd completed a loop despite driving in a straight line for 3 hours. He tried driving west. Same result. The rest area appeared ahead of him regardless of direction. He tried exit ramps, but they curved back onto I-80. He tried off-road, driving his truck across the scrubland, but after 15 minutes the highway would appear in front of him again, forcing him back into the pattern. Mitchell stopped at the rest area again. The other drivers welcomed him back. "First loop always includes a panic run," the old driver said. "We've all tried. There's no escape. We just drive and loop and drive and loop." "Someone must have noticed," Mitchell said. "Our companies, our families, the police. We're missing." "Are we?" a younger driver asked. "Check your phone. Call your family." Mitchell tried. His wife answered. Honey, how's the drive? Where are you? I'm in Wyoming. Something's wrong. I'm trapped somehow. Trapped? Are you broken down? Do you need assistance? No, I can't explain. I keep driving the same stretch over and over. His wife laughed. You sound tired. Get some rest and call me tomorrow. Mitchell tried to explain further, but the conversation went in circles. His wife couldn't comprehend what he was telling her. She perceived nothing wrong, believed he was progressing normally on his route. Days blurred together, though Mitchell's phone insisted only hours were passing. He drove loop after loop, sometimes stopping at the rest area to talk with the other trapped drivers, sometimes pushing through. The woman who'd been looping for 87 cycles told him her story. She'd been driving to her daughter's wedding, took I-80 through Wyoming, and never arrived. Her daughter called regularly, still planning the wedding, never mentioning that months had passed without her mother arriving. We exist in 2 states, the old driver explained. Out there in the real world, we're still driving, still making progress. Our GPS shows us moving. Our families track us normally. But here in this folded space, we're caught in a loop that repeats endlessly. Both versions are real. Both are happening. Mitchell drove for what felt like months. He memorized every vehicle in the recurring pattern, every rock formation, every sign. He documented the phenomenon obsessively, filming his loops, recording his phone calls with family who perceived nothing wrong, logging his fuel consumption that never depleted his tank. On his 100th loop, or maybe his 1000th, he noticed something new. One of the trucks that appeared in every pattern was blue like his, but slightly different. He tried to catch up to it, but it maintained perfect distance ahead of him. Then he saw the license plate, his own plate number. Mitchell accelerated, pulling alongside the other truck. The driver was him, older, grayer, wearing the same clothes he'd started this journey in, but worn and faded. The other Mitchell looked at him with hollow eyes and mouthed words, "Keep driving." The trucks separated. Mitchell pulled to the shoulder, hyperventilating. He understood then that the loops weren't just repeating, they were stacking. Every version of himself that had been trapped here was still here, all driving the same eternal route, passing each other like ghosts on a highway that went nowhere. He stopped fighting. He joined the other drivers at the rest area permanently, or as permanently as anything could be in a place where time was meaningless. They formed a community of the trapped, sharing stories, supporting each other through the psychological horror of eternal repetition. Mitchell's family still talks to him regularly. He calls them during his loops, has conversations about his progress. They're planning his retirement party, expecting him to arrive in Miami any day now. In their reality, he's been driving for a few days. In his reality, he's been looping through Wyoming for years. His truck still exists somewhere in the real world. His GPS showing steady progress. His logbook automatically recording miles. But in this folded space of I-80, Mitchell Grant drives forever. One of dozens of truckers caught in a highway that doubles back on itself. A loop carved into reality by some flaw in the fabric of space-time. He still drives every day, completing his loops because stopping feels worse. The motion maintains the illusion of progress, of purpose. Sometimes he sees himself driving the opposite direction, and they acknowledge each other with a small wave, versions of the same man, separated by loops but trapped in the same eternal journey. He's been making his final run for years now, and he suspects he always will be, caught between Seattle and Miami, forever crossing Wyoming on a highway that never ends, a retirement party waiting for him in a world he can't reach, his last load never to be delivered. Mitchell Grant was 56 years old and approaching retirement. After 32 years of long-haul trucking, he'd planned his final run to be symbolic. A coast-to-coast haul from Seattle to Miami, the longest route he could book. On September 23, 2018, he departed Seattle with a mixed load, his wife and grown children planning a retirement party for his return. He never made it to Miami. Instead, he delivered his cargo to somewhere much stranger. The first 2 days were perfect. Mitchell savored every mile, every sunset, every mountain pass. He'd driven millions of miles in his career, and this farewell tour let him appreciate the beauty he'd often taken for granted. By day 3, crossing Wyoming on I-80, something began to feel wrong. The highway looked normal, but Mitchell couldn't shake the sensation that he'd driven this exact stretch before. Not just on previous trips, but recently within the past hour. The same configuration of trucks ahead of him, the same cloud formation, the same billboard advertising a roadside attraction. He checked his odometer. He was making progress, but his memory insisted otherwise. Near Rawlins, Wyoming, he saw a rest area and decided to stop, break the sense of déjà vu. The parking lot was full of trucks, but something about them seemed staged, positioned too precisely, too symmetrically. Mitchell parked and walked to the facilities building. Inside, he encountered other drivers, maybe 15 of them, all sitting in the seating area. They turned to look at him with expressions of resignation and defeat. An older driver approached him, a man who looked to be in his 70s. "You're new," the man said. "How many loops have you been through?" "Loops?" Mitchell asked. "How many times have you driven this stretch? Seen the same things repeating?" Mitchell's confusion must have shown. The older driver sighed. "You're still on your first. That's why you stopped. We all stopped during our first loop, trying to break the pattern, but there is no breaking it." The other drivers nodded. One woman spoke up. "I've been here for 87 loops. Some of these guys have been through hundreds. We drive I-80 through Wyoming over and over and end up back at this rest area every time." Mitchell backed toward the door. "This is insane. You're all insane." "Check your fuel," the old driver said. "No matter how much you use, it resets. Check your phone. The date never advances. We're stuck, driver. And now, so are you." Mitchell ran to his truck and pulled out of the rest area, his heart racing. He drove east at maximum speed, desperate to reach the Wyoming border. Hours passed. He crossed into Nebraska according to the signs. But then he saw it ahead. The same rest area. The same configuration of trucks. He'd completed a loop despite driving in a straight line for 3 hours. He tried driving west. Same result. The rest area appeared ahead of him regardless of direction. He tried exit ramps, but they curved back onto I-80. He tried off-road, driving his truck across the scrubland. But after 15 minutes, the highway would appear in front of him again, forcing him back into the pattern. Mitchell stopped at the rest area again. The other drivers welcomed him back. "First loop always includes a panic run," the old driver said. "We've all tried. There's no escape. We just drive and loop and drive and loop." "Someone must have noticed," Mitchell said. "Our companies, our families, the police, we're missing." "Are we?" a younger driver asked. "Check your phone, call your family." Mitchell tried. His wife answered. "Honey, how's the drive? Where are you?" "I'm in Wyoming. Something's wrong. I'm trapped somehow." "Trapped? Are you broken down? Do you need assistance?" "No, I can't explain. I keep driving the same stretch over and over." His wife laughed. "You sound tired. Get some rest and call me tomorrow." Mitchell tried to explain further, but the conversation went in circles. His wife couldn't comprehend what he was telling her. She perceived nothing wrong, believed he was progressing normally on his route. Days blurred together, though Mitchell's phone insisted only hours were passing. He drove loop after loop, sometimes stopping at the rest area to talk with the other trapped drivers, sometimes pushing through. The woman who'd been looping for 87 cycles told him her story. She'd been driving to her daughter's wedding, took I-80 through Wyoming, and never arrived. Her daughter called regularly, still planning the wedding. never mentioning that months had passed without her mother arriving. "We exist in two states," the old driver explained. "Out there in the real world, we're still driving, still making progress. Our GPS shows us moving, our families track us normally, but here in this folded space, we're caught in a loop that repeats endlessly. Both versions are real. Both are happening." Mitchell drove for what felt like months. He memorized every vehicle in the recurring pattern, every rock formation, every sign. He documented the phenomenon obsessively, filming his loops, recording his phone calls with family who perceived nothing wrong, logging his fuel consumption that never depleted his tank. On his 100th loop, or maybe his 1,000th, he noticed something new. One of the trucks that appeared in every pattern was blue like his, but slightly different. He tried to catch up to it, but it maintained perfect distance ahead of him. Then he saw the license plate, his own plate number. Mitchell accelerated, pulling, alongside the other truck. The driver was him, older, grayer, wearing the same clothes he'd started this journey in, but worn and faded. The other Mitchell looked at him with hollow eyes and mouthed words. "Keep driving." The truck separated. Mitchell pulled to the shoulder, hyperventilating. He understood then that the loops weren't just repeating, they were stacking. Every version of himself that had been trapped here was still here, all driving the same eternal route, passing each other like ghosts on a highway that went nowhere. He stopped fighting. He joined the other drivers at the rest area permanently, or as permanently as anything could be in a place where time was meaningless. They formed a community of the trapped, sharing stories, supporting each other through the psychological horror of eternal repetition. Mitchell's family still talks to him regularly. He calls them during his loops, has conversations about his progress. They're planning his retirement party, expecting him to arrive in Miami any day now. In their reality, he's been driving for a few days. In his reality, he's been looping through Wyoming for years. His truck still exists somewhere in the real world, his GPS showing steady progress, his logbook automatically recording miles. But in this folded space of I-80, Mitchell Grant drives forever, one of dozens of truckers caught in a highway that doubles back on itself, a loop carved into reality by some flaw in the fabric of space-time. He still drives every day, completing his loops because stopping feels worse. The motion maintains the illusion of progress, of purpose. Sometimes he sees himself driving the opposite direction, and they acknowledge each other with a small wave, versions of the same man separated by loops but trapped in the same eternal journey. He's been making his final run for years now, and he suspects he always will be caught between Seattle and Miami, forever crossing Wyoming on a highway that never ends. A retirement party waiting for him in a world he can't reach. His last load, never to be delivered.